Welcome back to the accessory structures of the integumentary system. In the first video, we listened to some information about hair and hair growth and hair follicles. In this one, we're going to start to look at what causes hair color. As is everything in our body, hair color is determined by our genes. Our genes can produce a couple different types of melanin, a word we've heard before with the epidermis. Melanin causes our skin color as well. But different types of melanin are present within the epidermal cells of the hair follicle. Those two types of melanin are eumelanin and pheomelanin. If your genes produce eumelanin, then you will have brown to black hair. The more eumelanin produced, the darker your hair, just like with our skin color. Everyone has melanin. The more melanin produced, darker their skin color. The other type of melanin in our epidermal cells is called pheomelanin, and this one will cause hair to be between blonde or reddish. Once again, the more pheomelanin you have, the more reddish your hair becomes. And the last one is when a person has white hair. This is called albinism, or no melanin is present whatsoever. So albinism is complete lack of color. While this isn't very common with younger people, older people who do have white hair color, it is because they no longer have either the eumelanin or pheomelanin, whatever they used to have. Here we can see that chart that we saw in the previous slide a little bit larger, so we can make out the colors a little bit better. Coming up very shortly, I am going to have a series of questions coming up that's going to ask you to look at the various numbered pictures, maybe 1 or maybe 16, maybe 613, and it's going to ask you to identify which type of melanin is present, eumelanin or pheomelanin, and if you would expect the hair sample to have a lot of that type or not a lot of that type. Moving on, we're going to talk about our goosebump muscle, known as the erector pili muscle. In this picture, we can see the hair follicle lined with these cube-like cells, the hair inside it, and we can see this muscle which attaches to the inferior region of the hair follicle itself. Now, when this muscle, which is smooth muscle, when it contracts, it causes the hair to stand up on end, and when it relaxes, the muscle relaxes, the hair goes soft again. So it does attach to the hair follicle, and the neurons that stimulate this to contract come from the brain, and they're usually associated with our homeostatic balance of body temperature. Although they can also be stimulated out of fear, and we'll talk about that when we get to the nervous system. The next accessory structure is our nails, and this is just nails in general. This would apply to both finger and toenails. The function of nails is to protect the tips of our digits, our fingers, allow us to grip things, pick things up a little bit easier, and in this picture we can see the nail resting on top of the tip of our finger. The fingernail itself is primarily called the nail plate, or sometimes the nail body. This would best be represented by the letter A in this picture. It's the visible portion. What this nail rests upon is the letter E in this picture, which is in red. That is called the nail bed. Another important term I'm going to come back and talk about in a little bit is called the lanula. The lanula is this whitened crescent-shaped region at the base of our fingernail. On this picture, it would be represented by the letter B. That's going to come up in a second as well. So, now that we spoke of the nail plate, the bed, and the lanula, let's talk about how our fingernails grow. The nail bed, the letter E in red here, it is epidermal cells, just like in our hair follicles. And these epidermal cells also keratinize as they mature, and they grow just like in our hair. The bottommost deep layers, they actively undergo mitosis, they reproduce, and they push upward. And as cells get pushed upward, they keratinize, they compact, they become our fingernail. So why does our fingernail grow outward instead of upward? Well, you can kind of see that in this picture. We have a very bright red right in here, and that color red kind of fades off to a little bit deeper, darker color as you move towards the fingertip. This red color indicates where the cells of the nail bed are undergoing mitosis at the fastest rate. And you can see it's kind of deep at the back part of the nail, and what you can't see is back here a little bit even, which causes them to push outward instead of upward. So this causes the fingernail to be pushed outward, although as you can see right here, the fingernails, they do continue to thicken as they move outward away from the lanula. So these cells, they do undergo mitosis, they do keratinize, they do add to the thickness of the fingernail, but because these ones undergo mitosis quicker, it causes the fingernail to be pushed outward rather than upward. The last accessory structure that we're going to be covering are the glands of our skin, and there are a couple different types. There are sebaceous glands, sweat glands, which are also known as sudoriferous glands, and then there are ceruminous glands. So let's check them out. The first that we're going to talk about is sebaceous glands. And before we talk about sebaceous glands, I wanted to touch on the three possible ways that glands can operate. And they're shown down at the bottom here. First off, there are marrow-krang glands, apocrine glands, and holocrine glands. They all release products, they all secrete things. The difference is how they actually secrete their substances. So what we're looking at here in each of these glands is a layer of epidermal cells. So you can see the three epidermal cell layers, but we can see that something different is happening in each of them. With marrow-krine glands, the cells remain intact, and contents within the cell gets released into the lumen or hole or hollow region of the gland, and the secretion itself travels upward and out. With apocrine glands, a little bit different. The secretions are pinched off in these tiny little vesicles, which is actually part of the cell itself, and as they travel up the lumen or up the hollow region of the gland, we can see that the vesicles break down, and we slowly see the secretions come out and be released up here a little bit more rather than down here straight from the cells. And the last one, holocrine, the cells undergo mitosis, pushing cells outward, and entire cells are being released into the lumen or the hollow region of the gland. And as the cell travels outward, the cell breaks down, releasing the secretion once again up here. So marrow-krine, apocrine, holocrine. Sebaceous happen to be holocrine in nature. They're called sebaceous glands because they produce a secretion known as sebum. Sebum is the oil that goes onto our hair. So what's the purpose of the hair oil? Well, it's not bad, as all the media and advertising try to kind of make it seem. Its function really is to keep the skin and the hair soft and pliable and waterproof, as oil tends to do, and actually prevents against split ends. So if you have nice dry hair, you're going to have a lot of split ends. However, sometimes hair oil can be secreted in excess, and that can lead to acne, sometimes on the face, sometimes with even in the scalp of the head itself. So where can these things be found? Well, pretty much everywhere on your body, because hair's everywhere on your body, with the exception of soles of the feet and your palms. Sometimes sebaceous glands open up directly to the surface of the skin. These would be found in like your lips or corners of the mouth. Everywhere else, they connect to a hair follicle. So let's check out our picture of the integument. We can see the hair follicle right here with the hair inside. Here's our sebaceous gland. It attaches right to a hair follicle, except in the lips and corner of the mouth, where it would secrete sebum onto the hair. The second type of gland is our sweat glands or sudoriferous glands. Widespread in the skin. These ones, as we can see in this picture, are deeper within the dermis, and they're a big ball of coil that extends upward to the surface of our skin. So this is our dermis, this is our epidermis. These are the glands that would be used in the homeostatic regulation of body temperature, so sweating to cool our body down. We spoke about previously how that functions in Chapter 1. So sweat glands are considered to be an equine gland in most circumstances, like on our forehead and back. And we call equine, marrowcrine. They secrete substances directly from the cell into the lumen. They go straight up, and in this case would go onto the surface of the skin. Equine glands, they are marrowcrine glands. They're just given a different name. So it's a variation of marrowcrine. Why it's a different name, I couldn't exactly tell you. Sometimes they can be called apocrine glands, although they function not like apocrine. They function exactly like marrowcrine. So why they're even called apocrine is probably going back to a time before we actually learned a little bit more about these glands. The sweat glands that are considered apocrine would be found in like our armpits and our pubic region, because the sweat that is secreted from these glands gets mixed with the bacteria. There's bacteria found in our armpits and our groin regions, and the mixing of that sweat with the bacteria causes the bacteria to produce a smell or a scent, as that bacteria actually will use the salts from our sweat as a source of food, which in turn puts off an odor. Kind of funny to think that you have bacteria in your armpits that live on your sweat, but it's how it works. So once again, the equine version of the sweat glands, also a marrowcrine gland. They're more numerous than the apocrine. They're found in the larger region of the body, being the forehead, the neck, and the back, and they're used for homeostatic regulation of our body temperature. And once again, the apocrine, although they don't function as an apocrine, they are found in our pubic regions, and the sweat they release is metabolized by bacteria, which causes that scent. And the last type is ceruminous glands. They are called ceruminous glands because they secrete cerumen within our ears, but there's a different type of ceruminous gland found in the mammary glands. They secrete milk. So depending on location, they do have different secretions, but they are still ceruminous glands. These would be a category of apocrine in nature.